Single sign-on, or SSO, refers to the ability of a user to log in or access multiple systems by providing credentials only once. SSO increases security because the user only needs to remember one credential and is less likely to type them. Also, it's much more convenient for users to access network resources if they only need to sign in once. As an example, consider a user who needs to access multiple servers within a network to do normal work. Without SSO, the user needs to know a set of credentials to log in locally and additional credentials for each of the servers. Many users would type these credentials to remember them. Alternatively, in a network with SSO capabilities, the user only needs to log on to the network once. The SSO system typically creates a type of SSO secure token that is used throughout the entire login session. Every time a user accesses a network resource, the SSO system uses this secure token for authentication. Kerberos and LDAP include SSO features. SSO needs strong authentication to be effective. If users create weak passwords, attackers can guess them and gain access to multiple systems. Some people argue that SSO increases the risks, because if an attacker can obtain the user's credentials, it gives the attacker access to multiple systems. Transitive trust creates an indirect relationship of trust. For example, imagine a transitive trust relationship between Jack, Sam, and Julie. Jack trusts Sam. Sam trusts Julie. Because of the transitive trust relationship, Jack trusts Julie as well. Of course, that's not always true of humans. And if Sam shares Jack's secrets with Julie, well, they might be a little angry with Jack and Sam. However, it reduces network management in a domain. Within an LDAP-based network, domains use transitive trusts for SSO. Its parent domain is example.com, and the configuration includes two subdomains, try and test. An LDAP transitive trust used for SSO in this example, there is a two-way trust between the main domain, example.com, and its child domain, try.example.com. The parent trusts the child, and the child trusts the parent. Similarly, there is a two-way trust between the parent domain and the blog subdomain. There is no direct trust between the two subdomains. However, the transitive relationship creates a two-way trust between them. All these domains include objects such as users, computers, and groups. Jack's user account is in the try domain, and a server named test is in the test domain. With transitive trust, it is possible to grant Jack access to the test server directly, without creating another trust relationship between the try and test domains. Without the trust relationship, you would have to create another account for Jack in the test area before granting him access. Additionally, Jack will need to manage the password for this second account separately. However, with transitive trust relationships, the network supports SSO, so Jack only needs a single account. Security Assertion Markup Language, or SAML, is an extensible markup language XML-based data format used for SSO in web browsers. Imagine two websites hosted by two different organizations. Normally, a user needs to provide different credentials to access both websites. However, if organizations trust each other, they can use SAML as a unified identity management system. Users authenticate with one website and do not need to re-authenticate when accessing the second website. Most web-based portals use SAML for SSO. The user logs into the portal once, and then the portal transmits evidence of the user's authentication to the back-end systems. As long as an organization authenticates users, they do not need to re-authenticate to access other sites on the portal. SAML defines 3 roles. Manager. This is usually a user. The user logs on once. If necessary, the principal requests an ID from the identity provider. Identity provider. An identity provider creates, maintains, and manages credentials for principals. Service provider. A service provider is an organization that provides services to managers. For example, a service provider can host one or more websites accessible through a web-based portal. When a principal tries to access a resource, the service provider first redirects the principal to obtain an identity. This process sends several XML-based messages between systems. However, it is generally transparent to the user. It is important to be aware that the primary purpose of SSO is to identify and authenticate users. Users request an identity and prove this identity with their credentials. SSO does not provide authorization. For example, if the power plant and the school system form a federation using SAML, this does not automatically give everyone in the school system full access to the nuclear power plant's resources. Authorization is completely separate. However, many Federation SSO systems, including SAML, have the ability to transfer authorization data between their systems. So in other words, it is possible to use SAML for single sign-on authentication and authorization. Some SSO systems can connect authentication mechanisms from different environments, such as different operating systems or different networks. A common method is a federated identity management system, often integrated as a federated database. This federated database provides centralized authentication in an inhomogeneous environment. As an example, imagine the Texas nuclear power plant establishing a relationship with the Texas school system and allowing power plant employees to access school resources. Combining these 2 networks in a single network is not possible or desirable. However, you can create a federation of 2 networks. Once installed, plant staff will log in using their power plant accounts and then access shared school resources without logging back in. A federation requires a federated identity management system that all members of the federation use. In the previous example, the members of the federation are power plant and the school system. Members of the federation agree on a standard for federated identities, and then exchange information based on the standard. A federated identity binds a user's credentials from different networks or operating systems, but the federation treats this as a single identity. Shibboleth is one of the federated identity solutions specifically mentioned in the CompTIA Security Plus exam objectives. It is open source and available for free, making it a more cost-effective solution than some commercially available federated identity solutions. It also includes open SAML libraries, written in C++ and Java, making it easy for developers to increase their usefulness. OAuth is an open authorization standard that many companies use to secure access to protected resources. Instead of creating a different account for each website you access, you can usually use the same account you created with Google, Facebook, PayPal, Microsoft, or Twitter. As an example, imagine the CompTest department store decides to sell some of its products online, and management allows customers to shop via PayPal. Developers configure their websites to exchange application programming interface, API calls, with PayPal servers. Now, when the customers make a purchase, they sign in with their PayPal account and make their purchases via PayPal. OAuth transfers data between PayPal and the Comtest site, so the store gets the money and knows what to send to the customer. One benefit for customers is they don't need to create another account for Comtest. OpenID Connect works with OAuth 2.0 and allows clients to authenticate end users without managing their credentials. So in this context, the client is typically a website or application that needs to authenticate users. OpenID Connect provides identification services without requiring the application to process credentials. It also facilitates the user experience for users. For example, Skyscanner is an application for finding flights, hotels, and car rentals. It allows users to log in using their Facebook credentials. Once you've done that, Skyscanner offers users a more personalized experience.